The morning sun painted the sky orange above New Busan colony as Hannah walked through the abandoned research facility. Her boots crunched on broken glass and twisted metal. She pulled her jacket tighter against the cold wind that whistled through. The damaged walls. The facility had been empty for 2 years now, ever since the funding ran out and the scientists left. Hannah was not supposed to be here. Colony Administrator Daeho had made it clear that the old research buildings were off. "Limits too dangerous," he said. "Too many sharp edges and unstable structures." But Hannah needed plant samples for her greenhouse work. And the old botanical lab might still have seeds or specimens she could use. She stepped carefully over a fallen beam and made her way deeper into the ruins. Her flashlight beam cut through the darkness, revealing overturned tables and scattered papers. Most of the equipment was gone, but she hoped to find something useful in the storage rooms. That was when she heard it. A soft whimpering sound, almost like a crying child. Hannah froze and listened. The sound came again, weak and desperate. She followed the noise down a dark hallway, her heart beating faster with each step. The sound led her to a small storage room. At the back of the facility, Hannah pushed open the damaged door and shined her light inside. In the corner, huddled behind a stack of old boxes, was something that made her gasp. It was a warfox pup, but unlike any she had seen in the colony database. Its fur was pure white, almost glowing in the flashlight beam. War foxes were usually dark gray or black, with yellow eyes and fierce expressions. This one was different. Its eyes were pale blue, and its white fur was matted with blood from several wounds. The pup looked up at her with those strange blue eyes, and Hannah felt something stir in her chest. It was so small and helpless, nothing like the massive predators that adults became. This one was barely the size of a regular earth fox, though she knew it would grow to be 6 feet tall if it survived. Most colonists would have run screaming. War foxes were dangerous. Everyone knew that. They were apex predators with claws that could slice through metal and intelligence that made them cunning hunters. The colony security forces had standing orders to shoot war foxes on sight if they came too close to the settlement, but Hannah did not run. She had always been different from the other colonists. While they feared the wildlife of New Busan, she was fascinated by it. She spent her days studying the native plants, learning how they adapted to the harsh environment. She believed that humans and the local ecosystem could coexist if they just tried to understand each other. The pup whimpered again, and Hannah saw that one of its legs was badly injured. Deep claw marks ran along its side, probably from another war fox. The wounds were infected and needed immediate attention. Without medical care, the pup would die within days. Hannah made a decision that would change everything. She took off her jacket and carefully approached the injured animal. The pup did not try to bite or scratch her. Instead, it seemed to understand that she wanted to help. It let her wrap the jacket around its small body and pick it up. The pup was heavier than she expected, its bones dense and strong even at this young age. But it nestled against her chest as she carried it out of the ruins, making soft sounds that almost sounded like purring. Hannah felt a strange warmth spread through her, as if the animal was somehow communicating its gratitude. Getting the pup back to her greenhouse without being seen was not easy. The colony was small, and everyone knew everyone else's business. Hannah had to wait until the evening shift change, when most people were eating dinner or resting in their quarters. She slipped through the back paths, avoiding the main walkways where security cameras might spot her unusual cargo. Her greenhouse was located on the edge of the colony, close to the perimeter fence. It was perfect for her work with native plants, but it also meant she was relatively isolated from the other colonists. This isolation, which had always made her feel lonely, now seemed like a blessing. Once inside the greenhouse, Hannah set up a makeshift medical station. She cleaned the pup's wounds with antiseptic and bandaged them carefully. The animal remained calm throughout the process, watching her with those intelligent blue eyes. When she finished, it curled up on a soft blanket she had spread on the floor and fell asleep. Over the next few days, Hannah divided her time between her regular botanical work and caring for the injured pup. She researched warfox biology in the colony database, learning about their diet, growth patterns, and behavioral traits. She discovered that war foxes were highly intelligent, possibly even more so than dolphins or chimpanzees back on Earth. The pup healed quickly, its natural regenerative abilities impressive even for a war fox. Within a week, it was walking normally and exploring the greenhouse with curious eyes. Hannah watched it examine her plants with obvious intelligence, sniffing certain specimens and avoiding others, as if it could sense which ones might be dangerous. She decided to name the pup Beak, which meant white in Korean. It seemed fitting for her. His unusual coloring, when she said the name out loud, the pup's ears perked up and it looked directly at her. From that moment on, it responded to the name as if it understood perfectly. As Beak grew stronger, Hannah began to notice something extraordinary. The pup seemed to understand not just his name, but complex instructions. When she asked him to stay in one corner while she worked with dangerous chemicals, he obeyed immediately. When she needed a specific tool, she could point to it and say, "Bring me that," and Beak would carefully carry it to her in his mouth. More surprising still, Beak seemed to sense her emotions. When Hannah was stressed about her work, he would come and sit beside her, his presence somehow calming. When she was happy, he would play and bounce around the greenhouse, sharing in her joy. It was as if they were developing a connection that went beyond normal human-animal relationships. Hannah began to think of Beak as more than just a pet or research subject. He was becoming her companion, her friend, and in some ways her family. She had no siblings back on Earth, and her parents had died in a transport accident before she came to New Busan. Beak filled an emptiness in her life she had not even realized was there. She started calling him her brother, first as a joke, then with growing seriousness. "Come here, little brother," she would say, and Beak would bound over to her side. "Help me with this, brother," she would ask, and he would do his best to assist with whatever task she was working on. But Hannah knew she could not keep Beak hidden forever. He was growing rapidly, already twice the size he had been when she found him. Soon he would be too large to hide, and the colony authorities would discover her secret. She dreaded that day, knowing that they would never understand the bond she had formed with the unusual albino war fox. For now, though, she was content to enjoy their time together. In the quiet hours of the evening, when her work was done and the colony was settling down for the night, Hannah would sit with Beak and tell him about her day. He would listen attentively, his blue eyes focused on her face, and she could swear he understood every word she said. Little did she know that her assessment was more accurate than she could possibly imagine, and that the bond between them was stronger and more significant than either of them yet realized. 3 weeks had passed since Hannah found Beak, and keeping him hidden was becoming impossible. The albino war fox had grown to the size of a large dog, his white fur now thick and glossy. His wounds had healed completely, leaving only faint scars beneath his coat. But with his growth came new challenges that Hannah had not expected. The first problem was food. Beak's appetite had increased dramatically as he grew. War foxes were carnivores, and the small portions of protein rations Hannah could spare from her own meals were no longer enough. She had started sneaking extra food from the colony cafeteria, but the kitchen staff were beginning to notice the missing supplies. "Strange thing," said Cook Minsu to Hannah one morning as she picked up her breakfast. "We keep coming up short on meat portions, almost like someone is taking extra." His eyes studied her face carefully, looking for any sign of guilt. Hannah forced herself to remain calm. "Maybe the inventory system is wrong," she suggested. "You know how the computers can be sometimes?" Minsu nodded slowly, but his expression remained suspicious. "Maybe, but I have been cooking for 20 years. I know how much food we should have." The second problem was space. Beak could no longer hide behind the plant tables in the greenhouse. He needed room to move and exercise, but the building was not designed for a creature his size. Hannah had to rearrange her entire workspace to accommodate him, moving delicate equipment to higher shelves and clearing floor space for him to walk around. But the biggest problem was Beak's intelligence. He was learning faster than Hannah had thought possible. Not only did he understand simple commands, but he seemed to grasp complex concepts. When she worked on her botanical research, he would watch intently, as if studying her methods. One day, Hannah was examining diseased plant samples under her microscope when she accidentally knocked over a container of specimens. The samples scattered across the floor, and she groaned in frustration. It would take hours to sort them properly. "Beak," she said without thinking. "I need to find the diseased samples. They have brown spots on the leaves." To her amazement, Beak immediately began sniffing through the scattered specimens. Within minutes, he had separated the diseased samples from the healthy ones. Using his nose to identify the subtle differences, he arranged them in neat piles just as Hannah would have done. Hannah stared at the organized samples in shock. No ordinary animal could have understood such a complex request. Beak looked up at her with his pale blue eyes, and she could swear she saw intelligence there that went far beyond normal animal instincts. "Good boy," she whispered, reaching out to stroke his white fur. "You are amazing, little brother." But Hannah's secret could not last forever. The colony was too small, and people were starting to ask questions. Her friend Jun-ho, who worked as an engineer in the power plant, noticed that her greenhouse was using more electricity than usual. "Your energy consumption is up 30% this month," he told her over lunch. "Hey, what are you growing in there that needs so much power?" Hannah tried to think of a reasonable explanation. "I am running some new experiments, testing different lighting conditions for the native plants." Jun-ho raised an eyebrow. "This must be some experiment. The heating system is working overtime too. It is like you have a large animal in there or something." The comment hit too close to home. Hannah felt her face flush red, and she quickly changed the subject. But she could see that Jun-ho was not convinced by her explanation. The situation became more complicated when Security Chief Yoon-ji started making her rounds more frequently. The colony's perimeter sensors had detected unusual movement near the greenhouse at night, and she was investigating possible security breaches. "We have had some strange readings from your section," Yoon-ji told Hannah during one of her visits. "Large heat signatures moving around after dark." "Are you sure? You are not keeping any unauthorized animals in there?" Hannah's heart raced, but she kept her voice steady. "Just my normal research activities. Sometimes I work late into the night." Yoon-ji walked around the greenhouse, her trained eyes scanning for anything unusual. Hannah held her breath, praying that Beak would stay hidden behind the storage containers where she had told him to wait. The war fox remained perfectly still, as if he understood the danger. "Human heat signatures do not move like that," Yoon-ji said finally. "Whatever's in here is moving on 4 legs, not 2. Before Hannah could respond, there was a commotion outside. Farmer Dong-woo came running up to the greenhouse, his face pale with worry. "Chief Yoon-ji, you need to see this," he gasped. "3 of my chickens are missing. Something got into the coop last night and took them." Yoon-ji's expression hardened. "What kind of tracks did you find?" "That is the strange part," Dong-woo replied. "The tracks are huge, like from a war fox, but they are white. I have never seen white war fox tracks before." Hannah felt her stomach drop. She glanced toward Beak's hiding spot, but he was nowhere to be seen. She realized with growing horror that he must have left the greenhouse during the night to hunt. In his natural environment, war foxes hunted for their own food, and Beak's instincts were telling him to do the same. "A white war fox," Yoon-ji repeated. "Slowly, that is very unusual. I need to report this to Administrator Yoon-soo immediately." Within an hour, the colony's emergency council was called into session. Hannah sat in the back of the meeting room, her hands shaking as she listened to the discussion. "We have a dangerous predator loose in the colony," announced Administrator Yoon-soo. "War foxes are not native to this immediate area, which means this one has traveled here from the deep forest. It may be injured or diseased, which could explain its unusual behavior." Colony Defense Coordinator Woo Jin stood up. "We need to organize hunting parties? A war fox this close to the settlement is a serious threat to our safety." "I agree," said Yoon-ji. "We should set traps around the perimeter and post guards at night. If we can capture it alive, we might be able to study it. But if it proves too dangerous, we will have to eliminate it." Hannah wanted to scream that they were wrong, that Beak was not dangerous, that he was intelligent and gentle. But she knew they would never believe her. To them, war foxes were monsters, not the complex creatures she had come to understand. That evening, Hannah returned to her greenhouse to find Beak waiting for her. He seemed to sense her distress and nuzzled against her legs, making soft sounds of concern. "They want to hunt you," she whispered, kneeling down to hold him. "They think you are dangerous." Beak looked up at her with those intelligent blue eyes, and Hannah felt a strange sensation in her mind. For just a moment, it was as if she could sense his thoughts, his understanding of the situation. He was not just a smart animal. He was something more, something that the colony could not understand. "I will not let them hurt you," she promised. "You are my brother, and I will protect you." But even as she spoke the words, Hannah knew that her protection might not be enough. The colony was mobilizing against Beak, and she was just one person against an entire settlement. She would have to find a way to prove that Beak was not the monster they thought he was. The next morning brought worse news. 2 more farms reported missing livestock, and the tracks were definitely from the white war fox. The colonists were growing panicked, and demands for action were getting louder. "We cannot wait any longer," Yunsu declared at the emergency meeting. "This creature is becoming bolder. Tonight we set the traps. Tomorrow we begin the hunt." Hannah sat in the meeting room, her heart breaking as she listened to them plan Beak's capture. She wanted to stand up and tell them the truth, but she knew they would never believe her. They would think she was crazy, a lonely woman who had lost her mind talking to animals. As the meeting ended and the colonists filed out, Junho approached her. His expression was gentle but concerned. "Hannah," he said quietly, "I have been thinking about our conversation yesterday, about your increased energy usage and the strange heat signatures. Is there something you want to tell me?" Hannah looked into the eyes of her oldest friend in the colony. She desperately wanted to confide in him, to share the burden of her secret. But she also knew that doing so would put both her and Beak in danger. "I'm just working hard on my research," she said finally. "Nothing more." Junho studied her face. "For a long moment, you can trust me, right? Whatever it is, I want to help." Hannah felt tears forming in her eyes. "I know, thank you." But as she walked back to her greenhouse, Hannah knew that time was running out. The traps would be set tonight, and the hunt would begin tomorrow. She had to find a way to save Beak, even if it meant revealing their secret to the world. The colony had made up their minds about war foxes. Now she would have to change them. The trap lines were set at sunset. Hannah watched from her greenhouse window as security teams positioned metal snares around the colony perimeter. The traps were designed to capture large animals without killing them, but Hannah knew that Beak could still be seriously injured if he got caught. "Stay inside tonight," she whispered to Beak, who was lying beside her workbench. "Do not go hunting, please." Beak looked up at her with his pale blue eyes and made a soft sound that almost seemed like agreement. But Hannah could see the restlessness in his movements. His hunting instincts were strong, and staying confined in the greenhouse was becoming harder for him each day. That night, Hannah barely slept. Every sound from outside made her jump, afraid that it might be Beak getting caught in one of the traps. She checked on him several times, relieved each time to find him still safely inside the greenhouse. But morning brought news that made her blood run cold. Scout Namji had returned from his routine patrol of the outer forest, and his report sent shockwaves through the colony. "Ships," he gasped as he stumbled into the administration building. "Massive ships in the sky, maybe 20 kilometers out. They are not human designs." Administrator Yunsu called another emergency meeting. The main hall was packed with worried colonists, all talking at once about what the ships might mean. Hannah sat in the back, her attention divided between the discussion and her concern for Beak, who was alone in the greenhouse. "The ships are definitely alien," announced Scout Namji as he stood before the crowd. "I counted at least 12 of them, each one the size of a city block. They have a dark, insect-like appearance, and they are moving slowly toward our position." Colony Defense Coordinator Wu Zhen activated the main display screen, showing a map of the surrounding area. "How long before they reach us?" "At their current speed, maybe 3 days," Namji replied. "But they have already started sending down smaller craft. I saw them landing in the forest and things came out of them, big things." What kind of things? Asked Yunji, leaning forward with concern. Namji shuddered. They looked like giant insects, but they walked on two legs and carried weapons. They were hunting the local wildlife, catching animals and taking them back to their ships. The hall erupted in frightened voices. Hana felt a chill run down her spine. An alien invasion was the last thing she had expected, and now the colony was facing a threat much worse than a single war fox. We need to contact Earth Command immediately, said Yunsu. Request immediate military support. Communications. Officer Inho stood up with a grim expression. I have been trying to reach Earth Command for the past hour. Our long-range transmitter has been jammed. We are completely cut off. The crowd began to panic. Voices rose in fear and confusion as the colonists realized their situation. They were alone on a frontier world, facing an unknown alien threat with no hope of rescue. What about the defense grid? Asked Farmer Dongwu. Can we hold them off? Wu Jin shook his head slowly. Our defenses are designed to handle small raids or wildlife attacks. We have 10 security officers, some automated turrets, and a basic shield generator. Against 12 alien warships, we would not last an hour. Hannah listened to the discussion with growing dread. The colony was doomed, and there was nothing they could do about it. But her thoughts kept returning to Beak. In all the panic about the alien threat, everyone had forgotten about the war fox hunt. She slipped out of the meeting and hurried back to her greenhouse. Beak was pacing restlessly, his white fur standing on end. When she entered, he immediately came to her side, pressing against her legs. Something is wrong, is it not? She said, kneeling down to hold him. You can sense it too. Beak's behavior had been strange all morning. He kept looking toward the forest, his ears flattened against his head. Several times, he had gone to the window and stared into the distance, making low, growling sounds, as if responding to her words. Beak walked to the window and stood on his hind legs, placing his front paws on the glass. He stared into the forest with intense concentration, his entire body tense. Hannah followed his gaze, but saw nothing unusual. The forest looked the same as always, with tall trees swaying in the afternoon breeze. But she had learned to trust Beak's instincts. If he sensed danger, then danger was coming. That evening, the colony's perimeter sensors detected movement in the forest. The automated defense system activated, flooding the area with searchlights. What they revealed made everyone's worst fears come true. The creatures from Namji's report were there. Just at the edge of the light, they stood 8 feet tall, with dark, chitinous bodies that gleamed like polished armor. Their heads were insect-like, with compound eyes that reflected the searchlights like mirrors. They carried weapons that looked like a cross between rifles and organic growths. Keth warriors breathed Wu Jin as he watched the security monitors. I have seen images of them in the military databases. They are scouts, studying our defenses. Creatures moved with disturbing coordination, spreading out around the colony perimeter. They stayed just beyond weapon range, observing and taking notes on handheld devices. It was clear they were planning something. They are mapping our defenses, said UNG, learning our patrol patterns and weapon positions. This is preparation. For an attack, Administrator Yunsu activated the colony-wide communication system. All residents report to the central bunker immediately. This is not a drill. We are under alien surveillance. As the colonists hurried toward the bunker, Hannah faced an impossible choice. She could not bring Beak to the bunker without revealing her secret, but she could not leave him alone in the greenhouse either. The Keth scouts were getting closer, and she had seen them examining the outer buildings. I cannot take you with me, she told Beak, as she gathered essential supplies. But I cannot leave you here either. They might find you. Beak seemed to understand her dilemma. He nuzzled against her hand, then walked to the back door of the greenhouse. He stood there looking at her, as if asking permission to leave. Want to go into the forest? Hannah asked. But it is dangerous out there. Beak made a sound that was almost like a sigh. Then he did something that shocked her. He walked back to her and placed his paw on her hand, looking directly into her eyes. For a moment, Hannah felt a strange tingling in her mind, as if something was trying to communicate with her. Images flashed through her consciousness. She saw the forest from above, as if she was flying through the trees. She saw hidden caves and underground passages. She saw other war foxes, their eyes glowing in the darkness. And she saw something else, something that made her gasp. She saw the Keth creatures. But they were not the unstoppable force everyone thought they were. They were afraid. They were afraid of something in the forest, something that hunted them. In return, the war foxes, she whispered, they are fighting back. Beak stepped away from her, and the strange visions faded. But Hannah understood what he was trying to tell her. The war foxes were not just random predators. They were part of an organized resistance against the Keth invasion. You have to go to them, she said. You have to join the fight. Beak nodded, a very human gesture that confirmed her suspicions about his intelligence. He was not just an animal. He was something much more. As the colony sirens wailed and the colonists huddled in their bunker, Hannah made a decision that would change everything. She opened the back door of the greenhouse and watched as Beak disappeared into the forest. "Stay safe, little brother," she whispered, "and come back to me." The next morning brought devastating news. The Keth forces had moved closer during the night, setting up a siege perimeter around the colony. Their weapons were trained on the main buildings, and their ships hovered menacingly overhead. But there was other news, too. The livestock that had been disappearing were found dead in the forest, but they had not been killed by war foxes. The wounds were from Keth weapons, and the bodies showed signs of experimentation. "They have been studying our animals," reported Namji, learning about Earth biology before the main attack. Hannah felt a mixture of relief and guilt. Relief that Beak was not responsible for the missing livestock, but guilt that she had allowed the colony to blame him. She wanted to tell everyone the truth, but she knew they would not believe her. The siege continued for 2 days. The Keth forces made no move to attack, but their presence was a constant threat. Food supplies in the bunker were running low, and the colonists were growing desperate. On the third night, Hannah was woken by a soft scratching at the bunker's emergency exit. She crept through the sleeping colonists and opened the small hatch. Beak was there, but he was not alone. 3 other war foxes stood behind him, their eyes glowing in the darkness. "You came back," she whispered, reaching out to touch his white fur. Beak pressed against her hand, and again she felt that strange tingling in her mind. This time, the images were clearer. She saw the Keth forces from above, their positions and movements. She saw their weaknesses, the gaps in their defenses, and she saw something else. She saw herself standing beside Beak, leading the colonists, in a counterattack that would drive the invaders away. "You want me to fight with you?" she said, understanding flooding through her. Beak nodded. The other war foxes stepped forward. They were accepting her as one of their own, recognizing the bond she shared with Beak. Hannah looked back at the sleeping colonists, then at the war foxes waiting in the darkness. The choice was clear. She could stay in the bunker and wait for the inevitable attack, or she could trust in the bond she had formed with her brother. "I will come with you," she said. "But first, I need to tell them the truth." The time for secrets was over. The colony needed to know about Beak, about the war foxes, and about the alliance that might be their only hope for survival. Hannah crept back through the sleeping colonists in the bunker, her heart racing with what she had discovered. Beak and the other war foxes waited outside in the darkness, but she knew she had to wake the others first. The colony needed to know the truth before it was too late. She gently shook Junho awake first. He was her closest friend, and if anyone would believe her, it would be him. "Junho," she whispered, "I need to tell you something important." He opened his eyes, confused by being woken in the middle of the night. "Hannah, what is wrong?" "The white war fox everyone has been hunting," she said quietly. "I found him. I have been taking care of him for weeks." Junho sat up quickly, suddenly fully awake. "What are you talking about? His name is Beak. He's not dangerous. He's intelligent, more intelligent than we thought possible, right? Now he is outside with other war foxes who want to help us fight the Keth." Junho stared at her in the dim light of the bunker. "Hannah, are you feeling okay? The stress of the siege might be affecting your thinking." "I am not crazy," Hannah insisted. Come with me. Let me show you. Before Junho could protest, Hannah led him to the emergency exit. She opened the hatch carefully, and Beak's white face appeared in the opening. His pale blue eyes reflected the bunker's emergency lighting. Junho gasped and stepped back. That is a war fox. It's a real war fox. Yes, said Hannah. But watch. She turned to Beak and spoke in a normal voice. Beak, this is my friend Junho. Can you show him that you understand? Beak looked at Junho for a moment, then did something that made the engineer's eyes widen in shock. The war fox extended one paw toward Junho in a clear gesture of greeting, just like a human offering a handshake. That is impossible, Junho breathed. There is more, said Hannah. She looked into Beak's eyes and concentrated, trying to recreate the mental connection she had felt earlier. Show him what you showed me about the Keth. Suddenly, Junho staggered backward, his hands going to his head. What is happening? I am seeing things. Images in my mind. Hannah felt it too. Her connection with Beak, she could see what Junho was experiencing. Images of the Keth forces, their positions, their weaknesses. But more than that, she could see memories that seemed to come from Beak himself. Ancient memories of a great war fought long ago. Humans and war foxes fighting side by side against insect-like creatures that looked exactly like the Keth. Ships. Burning in alien skies. Telepathic bonds between human soldiers and their war fox partners, allowing perfect coordination in battle. The war foxes, Junho whispered as the visions faded. They fought with humans before, against these same creatures. The Keth have been humanity's enemy for thousands of years, Hannah said, understanding flooding through her. But we forgot. We lost contact with the war foxes and forgot about the alliance. Beak made a soft sound and pressed his nose against Hannah's hand. More images flowed into her mind, showing her things that made her heart race with excitement and hope. War foxes had been waiting, watching human colonies for generations. They remembered the ancient alliance even when humans did not. They had been preparing for the day when the Keth would return. Breeding and training for a war that most humans did not even know was coming. We need to wake the others, said Hannah. They need to know. It took an hour to wake all the colonists and gather them in the main chamber of the bunker. Administrator Yunsu was not happy about being disturbed, and his mood grew worse when he saw Beak sitting calmly beside Hannah. What is that creature doing here? He demanded. Security? Remove it immediately. Wait, said Hannah, standing up. Please, just listen to me. This is Beak. He is the war fox you have been hunting, but he is not our enemy. He is here to help. Us. The bunker erupted in frightened voices. Some colonists moved away from Beak, while others demanded explanations. Security Chief Yunji reached for her weapon, but Junho stepped between her and the war fox. She is telling the truth, Junho said. I have seen it myself. The war fox is intelligent. It can communicate. That is impossible, said Yuensu. War foxes are predators, nothing more. Then explain this, said Hannah. She turned to Beak and spoke clearly. Beak, can you show them the positions of the Keth forces around our colony? Beak walked to the bunker's main display screen and stood on his hind legs. Using his claws, he began to draw on the touch-sensitive surface. Lines and symbols appeared, showing a detailed map of the area around the colony. The colonists watched in stunned silence as Beak marked the exact positions of every Keth warrior, every weapon emplacement, every ship. The map was more accurate than anything their own scouts had been able to produce. How does it know all this? Whispered Farmer Dongwu. Because the war foxes have been watching them, said Hannah. Fighting them. The missing livestock was not killed by war foxes. It was killed by Keth scouts who were studying earth animals. Beak finished his map and turned to face the assembled colonists. Then he did something that left everyone speechless. He bowed his head in a gesture of respect, just as a human might do when meeting strangers. The war foxes remember the old alliance, Hannah continued. They've been waiting for us to remember too. They want to fight alongside us again, just like their ancestors did. Communications Officer Inho stepped forward, his face pale. I have been monitoring Keth communications. Since the siege began, I could not understand their language, but I noticed something strange. They keep referring to something they call the White Death, something they fear. All eyes turned to Beak, whose pure white fur seemed to glow in the bunker's lighting. Albino. Warfoxes are rare, said Hannah. Maybe they have special significance. Maybe they are natural leaders, as if responding to her words. Beak walked to the center of the chamber and sat down. He closed his eyes and tilted his head back, making a sound that none of them had heard before. It was a howl, but unlike any wolf or dog howl. It was musical, complex, and seemed to carry for miles. Moments later, answers came from the forest. Dozens of howls echoed through the night, each one slightly different, but all harmonizing together. The warfoxes were calling to each other, and Beak was their conductor. There are so many of them, said Scout Namji in wonder. They have been hiding, said Hannah. It's waiting for the right moment. Waiting for someone to remember the alliance. Colony Defense Coordinator Wu Jin stepped forward, his expression thoughtful. If what you are saying is true, if the warfoxes really want to help us, then we might have a chance. Our weapons alone cannot defeat the Keth, but with warfox intelligence and forest knowledge, we could coordinate a counterattack, finished Yunji. Use their knowledge of Keith positions to strike where they are weakest. Administrator Yunsu looked around the bunker at his people. They were all watching him, waiting for his decision. The fear in their eyes was mixed with something else now. Hope. This is madness, he said finally. We are talking about trusting our lives to wild animals. Not wild animals, said Hannah firmly. Partners, allies, family. She knelt down beside Beak and placed her hand on his head. The moment she touched him, the mental connection flared to life again. But this time, it was stronger. She could feel not just Beak's thoughts, but the thoughts of every warfox in the forest. They were waiting. They were ready. They remembered the old songs, the old bonds, the old ways of fighting together. All they needed was for humanity to remember too. I can feel them, Hannah said, tears streaming down her face. All of them. They never forgot about us. They have been waiting for centuries for us to come back to them. The bunker fell silent, except for the distant howls of the warfoxes in the forest. Outside, the Keth forces continued their siege, unaware that their ancient enemies were gathering in the darkness. If we do this, said Yunsu slowly, if we trust these creatures, there is no going back. We will be betting everything on an alliance that most people would say is impossible. Sometimes impossible things are the only ones worth believing in, said Hannah. She looked around the bunker at the faces of her fellow colonists. She saw fear, but she also saw determination. They were tired of hiding, tired of waiting for the inevitable attack. They wanted to fight back. All in favor of accepting the Warfox alliance? Asked Yun-Su. One by one, hands rose throughout the bunker. Junho was first, followed by Yunji, then Wu Jin. Even the farmers and engineers, people who had never held weapons in their lives, raised their hands to vote for the impossible alliance. When the count was finished, it was unanimous. Every single colonist had voted to trust in the bond between Hannah and Beak, to forge a new alliance between their species. Beak stood up and walked to each person in the bunker, touching their hands with his nose. Each time he made contact, the colonists gasped as they felt the mental connection for themselves. It was brief and gentle, but it was real. They were no longer just humans hiding in a bunker. They were part of something larger, something that connected them to the warfoxes waiting in the forest. They were part of a family that had been separated for too long. The time for hiding was over. Tomorrow, they would fight back. Dawn was still an hour away when the colonists began their preparations. The bunker had been transformed from a hiding place into a command center. With Beak's detailed map of Keith's positions displayed on every screen, Hannah sat beside Beak, her hand resting on his white fur. The mental connection between them had grown, stronger through the night, and she could feel the presence of dozens of warfoxes gathering in the forest. Each one was a distinct personality in the network, but they all shared the same purpose. How many are out there? Asked Wu Jin as he studied the tactical displays. Hannah closed her eyes and reached out through the connection. Images flowed back. To her, showing war foxes moving through the trees like white shadows. 37 adults, she said. Maybe more coming from the outer territories, against over 200 Keth warriors, said Yonji grimly. The odds are still terrible. Numbers are not everything, said Junho. He had been working with the colony's communication equipment, trying to find a way to amplify the psychic connection between Hannah and the war foxes. If we can coordinate perfectly, we might be able to hit them where they least expect it. That was when Beak did something that amazed everyone. He walked to Junho's equipment and began touching specific components with his claws. Each touch activated circuits and connections that Junho had been struggling to link properly. Understands electronics, breathed the engineer. He knows how the communication system works. Through their mental link, Hannah could feel Beak's knowledge flowing into her mind. War foxes had been studying human technology for generations, learning how their machines worked. They had been preparing for the day when they would fight alongside humans again. He wants to help you build an amplifier, Hannah translated. Something that will let me coordinate with all the war foxes at once, not just him. Working together. Junho and Beak modified the colony's communication array. What should have taken hours was completed in minutes, with Beak's intuitive understanding of the equipment guiding Junho's technical skills. When they finished, Anna placed her hands on the modified transmitter. Immediately, her awareness exploded outward. She could feel every war fox in the forest, see through their eyes, share their thoughts and emotions. This is incredible, she gasped. I can see everything. Every Keth position, every weak point in their defenses, with a connection brought. More than just tactical information, Anna could feel the war fox's memories stretching back through generations. She saw the Great War that had ended the First Alliance. When human ships had departed from war fox worlds and never returned, she felt their sadness at being abandoned, and their joy at finally reconnecting with their old partners. They call us Thought Brothers, she said, tears streaming down her face. That is what they called human allies in the old days. We were family to them. Administrator Yuensu watched the preparations with growing amazement. The plan that was taking shape was unlike anything in military history. Instead of traditional tactics, they would use the perfect coordination that only telepathic bonds could provide. The Keth have surrounded us with 3 defensive rings, explained Wu Jin, pointing to Beak's map. Outer perimeter scouts, main battle positions, and inner siege weapons. They expect us to break out from the center, so they have concentrated their forces accordingly. But we are not going to break out, said Hannah, understanding the war fox's strategy. We are going to let them come to us. The plan was elegant in its simplicity, so the war foxes would create diversions at multiple points around the perimeter, drawing Keth forces away from their prepared positions. Meanwhile, selected colonists would work with warfox partners to infiltrate and sabotage key Keth installations. But the most important part of the plan depended on Hannah and Beak. They would serve as the central coordination point, using their amplified connection to guide every aspect of the battle in real time. I have never done anything like this before, Hannah admitted as they made final preparations. What if I make a mistake? What if people die because I give wrong instructions? Beak pressed against her side, and through their bond she felt his absolute confidence in her abilities. The war foxes had chosen her not because she was a warrior, but because she had the heart to see beyond species differences. She had called him brother when no one else would even call him friend. As the sun began to rise, the colonists took their positions. Those with military training were paired with experienced war foxes, while civilians were assigned to support roles. The elderly and children remained in the bunker, protected by the youngest war foxes, who were too small for battle, but fierce enough. To defend their new human family, Hannah sat at the modified communication console, her hands on the transmitter controls. Around her, the bunker hummed with nervous energy as people checked weapons and equipment one final time. All teams report ready, said Yunji over the radio. Through the Warfox network, Yana could see the Keith forces beginning their morning patrol rotations. They were confident, relaxed even. They had no idea that 37 intelligent predators were watching their every move. Begin Phase 1, Hannah said into her headset, Immediately diversions erupted around the colony perimeter. War foxes appeared at the edges of Keth camps, just long enough to be spotted before vanishing into the forest. The effect was exactly what they had hoped for. Keth commanders, alarmed by reports of multiple predator sightings, began pulling troops from their main positions to investigate. "They are taking the bait," reported Namji from his position with a warfox named Hugh. 15 warriors moving toward the north distraction point. Through her connection, Hannah could feel Hugh's satisfaction at leading the Keth soldiers away from their defensive positions. The warfox was enjoying the hunt, using his intelligence to outmaneuver enemies who thought they were chasing a simple animal. "Phase 2. Begin infiltration," Hannah commanded. This was the most dangerous part of the plan. Small teams of humans and warfoxes would sneak through the gaps created by the diversions and sabotage critical Keth equipment. The warfox's natural stealth abilities, combined with human knowledge of technology, made them perfect for this mission. Junho was part of the infiltration team, partnered with a warfox named Sul. Through the network, Hannah watched them approach. A Keth communication array. The alien equipment was heavily guarded, but Sul's predator instincts and Junho's technical skills made them a formidable combination. "Communication array in sight," Junho whispered into his radio. "Sul says there are 4 guards, but they are not paying attention to the forest behind them." Hannah felt Sul's predatory focus through the network. The warfox was analyzing the guards' movements, looking for the perfect moment to strike. It came. Sul moved like lightning, disabling two guards silently, while Junho used a stunner on the other 2. "Array is down," Junho reported as he planted explosive charges on the alien equipment. Keth forces are now cut off from their main fleet. Similar successes were reported around the perimeter. Warfox, stealth, and human technology proved to be an unstoppable combination. Weapon emplacements were sabotaged, supply depots were destroyed, and command posts were knocked offline. But the Keth were not helpless. As their equipment began failing, their commanders realized they were under coordinated attack. Orders went out to abandon the siege positions and consolidate forces for a direct assault on the colony. "They are massing for a final push," reported Yunji from her position at the main gate. "All remaining forces converging on our position." This was what the warfoxes had been waiting for. Instead of fighting the Keth in their prepared positions, they would face them in open battle where speed and coordination mattered more than fortifications. "All teams fall back to final positions," Hannah commanded. "Prepare for Phase 3. The colonists withdrew to defensive positions around the colony's main buildings, while the warfoxes took up positions in the surrounding forest. Through her connection, Hannah could feel their anticipation. This was the moment they had been preparing for through generations of waiting. The Keth assault began with a thunderous charge across the open ground around the colony. Over 100 warriors advanced in formation, their weapons firing plasma bolts that lit up the morning sky. But they were not charging into an unprepared settlement. They were charging into a carefully prepared trap, coordinated by minds that could communicate faster than any radio. "Now," said Hannah, and through the network, every warfox moved at once. The attack came from all directions simultaneously. Warfoxes burst from hidden positions in perfect coordination, their claws and teeth finding weak points in Keth armor that human weapons could not penetrate. At the same time, colonists provided covering fire from prepared positions, their shots. Guided by warfox intelligence about enemy movements, the battle was unlike anything the Keth had ever experienced. Every time they tried to coordinate their forces, the warfoxes anticipated their moves. Every time they focused on one threat, another appeared from an unexpected direction. Hannah sat at the center of it all. Her consciousness expanded across the entire battlefield. She could see through dozens of eyes, think with dozens of minds. Coordinate attacks that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. But the Keth were not defenseless. Their weapons were powerful, and their armor was strong. For every Keth warrior that fell, the Alliance paid a price. Hannah felt the pain of every wounded warfox, shared the fear of every struggling colonist. "Hugh is down," she reported, feeling the brave warfox's pain through the network. "Sul is injured, but still fighting." The battle raged for what felt like hours but was probably only minutes. The tide turned when Beak himself entered the fight. Leading a group of the largest war foxes in a direct assault on the Keth command group, through their bond, Hannah experienced the fight from Beak's perspective. She felt his strength as he leaped over Keth's defensive lines, his satisfaction as his claws found their mark, his determination to protect the family he had chosen. When the last Keth warrior fell, an eerie silence settled over the battlefield. The Alliance had won, but the cost had been high. Several war foxes were seriously injured, and 2 colonists had been wounded by plasma fire. But they were alive, they were free, and most importantly, they were still together. Hannah stumbled away from the communication console, exhausted by the mental strain of coordinating the battle. Beak was waiting for her, his white fur stained with dust and a few drops of alien blood. "We did it," she whispered, kneeling down to hold him. "We actually did it." Through their bond, she felt his pride and satisfaction, not just at winning the battle, but at something much more important. The Alliance was reborn. Humans and war foxes were family again. The aftermath of the battle was both victory and sorrow. The Keth forces had been completely defeated, their ships retreating into the darkness of space with what remained of their invasion fleet. But the cost of victory lay scattered across the battlefield in the form of wounded warriors, both human and warfox. Hannah worked tirelessly in the makeshift medical station they had set up in the colony's main hall. Her botanical knowledge proved invaluable in treating warfox injuries. As she understood which native plants had healing properties that worked with their unique biology, Beak lay on a medical table, his white fur matted with blood from a plasma burn across his shoulder. The wound was not life-threatening, but it was painful, and Hannah could feel his discomfort through their mental connection. "Stay still, little brother," she murmured as she applied healing salve to the injury. "You were so brave today." Through their bond, Beak shared images of the battle from his perspective. Hannah saw herself as he had seen her, coordinating the fight with calm determination. In his mind, she was not just his human friend, but a true war leader, worthy of the respect of every war fox in the forest. "You see me as stronger than I really am," she said softly. Beak's response came not in words, but in pure emotion. He saw her exactly as she was, and that was why he loved her. She had found him broken and alone, and instead of seeing a monster, she had seen family. That kind of love was the strongest force in the universe. As Hannah worked, other colonists moved through the medical station, helping where they could. The battle had changed everyone. Farmer Dongwu sat beside an injured war fox named Noak, gently stroking the creature's dark fur as it recovered from surgery. Engineer Inho was working with a war fox called Bam to repair damaged equipment. Their partnership already so natural that they barely needed to speak. "The connections are forming everywhere," observed Junho as he watched the interactions. "It's like the mental bonds are spreading beyond just you and Beak." Hannah looked around the room and realized he was right. The psychic network that had begun with her and Beak was expanding to include other human warfox pairs. Not everyone could form the deep telepathic connection she shared with Beak, but many were developing empathic links that allowed them to sense their partner's emotions and intentions. Administrator Yunsu approached the medical station with a serious expression. "Hannah, we need to talk about what happens next. The Keth fleet is gone, but they will be back. And when they return, they will bring more ships, more warriors." "The war foxes know," said Hannah, feeling Beak's agreement through their bond. "This was just the beginning. The Keth will not give up easily." "Then we need to be ready," said Yunsu. "And we need to contact other human colonies, warn them about what is coming." That evening, the entire colony gathered in the main square for what Yunsu called an alliance ceremony. It was not an official military or political event, but something more personal and meaningful. It was a celebration of the bonds that had been formed and a commitment to the future they would build together. Hannah stood beside Beak in the center of the square, surrounded by colonists and war foxes. Many of the humans had found partners among the war foxes, while others simply enjoyed the company of the intelligent creatures. Children played with war fox pups, their laughter filling the air with joy. Today we learned something important. Yunsu addressed the crowd. We learned that family is not always about blood or species. Sometimes, family is about choice, about trust, about the willingness to fight for each other when everything seems impossible. He turned to Hannah and Beak. Hannah, when you first told us about your brother, none of us believed you. Thought you were talking about a pet, or maybe just someone you cared about. We did not understand that you were telling us the literal truth. Hannah felt tears forming in her eyes as she looked at Beak. He saved us all, she said, not just in the battle, but before that. He taught us that being different does not mean being enemies. He showed us that understanding can bridge any gap. Beak made a soft sound and pressed against her side. Through their connection, she felt his love and gratitude. But she also felt something else, pride. He was proud of her. Proud of the choice she had made to call him brother when no one else would. The alliance between humans and war foxes will spread to other colonies, announced Colony Defense Coordinator Wu Jin. We will train together, fight together, and build a future together. The Keth Empire has faced human technology and war fox instincts separately. They have never faced them combined. Over the following weeks, New Busan was transformed. The war foxes did not just visit the colony, became permanent residents. New buildings were constructed to accommodate their different needs, while existing structures were modified to allow both species to work together comfortably. Hannah's greenhouse became the center of a new research program, studying the symbiotic relationship between humans and war foxes. Other scientists arrived from nearby colonies, eager to understand how the telepathic bonds worked and how they could be replicated. But for Hannah, the most important changes were personal ones. She was no longer the lonely botanist working in isolation. She was part of a family that included not just Beak, but dozens of war foxes and their human partners. The communication array is working perfectly, reported Junho one morning as they tested the enhanced telepathic amplification system. We can coordinate with Warfox packs up to 50 kilometers away. That will be important when the Keth return, said Hannah. Beak tells me that other Warfox communities are already preparing. They remember the old battle songs, the old strategies. Through her connection with Beak, Hannah had learned that war foxes across the planet were awakening to the renewed alliance. Communities that had hidden in deep forests for generations were sending representatives to meet with human colonies. The network was spreading faster than anyone had expected. A month after the battle, Hannah received a message that changed everything. Earth Command had finally re-established contact with New Busan, and their response to the Alliance report was immediate and overwhelming. They're sending a full diplomatic mission, announced Yunsu at the colony meeting. Scientists, military advisors, and xenobiologists. They want to study the Alliance and implement it across all human settlements. You ready for that kind of attention? Asked Yunji, looking at Hannah with concern. Hannah considered the question carefully. She had never wanted to be famous or important. All she had wanted was to help an injured animal and maybe find some companionship in her lonely work. But the Alliance had grown beyond anything she could have imagined. It is not about what I want, she said finally. It is about what is needed. The Keth Empire is still out there and they will return. Humanity needs the war foxes, and the war foxes need us. If sharing our story helps make that happen, then that is what we will do. Beak nuzzled against her hand, and through their bond she felt his complete agreement. They would face whatever came next together, as they always had. The diplomatic mission arrived 2 weeks later, bringing with them reporters, scientists, and military officials. Hannah found herself thrust into a spotlight she had never wanted, but she endured it because she understood its importance. The key to the Alliance is not the telepathic connection, she explained to the assembled delegation during one of many interviews. The connection is just a tool. The real foundation is trust, respect, and love. You cannot fake those emotions, and you cannot force them to exist. But how do we replicate what you have accomplished here? Asked the lead xenobiologist. How do we teach other humans to form these bonds? Hannah looked at Beak, who was lying calmly beside her despite the crowd of strangers. You start by seeing them as individuals, not as animals. You start by listening. Instead of commanding, start by offering friendship instead of demanding obedience. It sounds simple, said the military advisor, but changing the way an entire species thinks about another species will take time. We have time, said Hannah. The war foxes have been waiting for centuries. They can wait a little longer for humans to remember what they once knew. 6 months after the battle, New Busan had become the center of a new kind of society. Human war fox families were common. Children grew up bilingual in spoken language and telepathic communication. And the colony's defenses were stronger than any purely human settlement. Hannah stood on the colony's rebuilt walls. Watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and purples, Beak sat beside her, his white fur glowing in the evening light. Other human war fox pairs were scattered along the walls, sharing the peaceful moment. Do you ever regret it? She asked Beak, through their mental connection. Choosing to trust a lonely human, instead of staying wild and free? His response came as pure emotion, rather than images or words. Love, contentment, and absolute certainty that he had made the right choice. He had found not just a partner, but a purpose. The alliance was his legacy as much as hers. In the distance, war fox pups played with human children in the colony gardens. A new generation was growing up that would never know a world where humans and war foxes were enemies. They would inherit a universe where cooperation was natural and understanding was instinctive. The Keth will return someday, Hannah said, feeling the truth of it through the war fox network. But when they do, they will face something they have never encountered before. They will face a true alliance, built on love instead of fear. Pressed against her side and through their bond, she felt his confidence in that future. They had started as two lonely creatures who had found each other by accident. They had become the foundation of an alliance that would reshape both their species. As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Hannah thought about the report she would send to Earth's command tomorrow. It would detail the latest developments in human war fox cooperation, the new colonies that were requesting alliance advisors, and the expanding network of telepathic bonds that connected communities across the planet. But the most important part of the report would be personal. It would tell the story of a young woman who had called an albino war fox her brother, and how that simple act of love had changed the course of history. No one believed it until you fought for me, she whispered to Beak, but they believe it. Now, through their eternal bond, she felt his response. He had not fought for her, he had fought with her, as brothers do. And together, they had shown both their species that family was not about biology or similarity. Family was about choice, trust, and the willingness to stand together against any threat. Family was about love that transcended all boundaries. Family was what they had built together, and what they would defend together for as long as the stars shone in the sky.